So I'm here today with my friend and dear long-standing friend Danny Webber.
Long-standing.
Indeed, yeah, very long-standing actually. And I had a little look at the record and realised that it was 8 years in November.
Okay.
That I've been looking after you.
Due a testimonial in football, we have a testimonial of 10 years. So what we're looking at 2 years' time.
Well, this is our testimonial.
Yeah.
So Danny, basically, well, thank you first and foremost for coming in and having this chat with us. And obviously very, very interested in life in football, life after football. And I think a lot of the people that will be watching this today will be very, very interested in what you've achieved as a football player yourself. And obviously we had the pleasure of helping you out in the latter stages of your career, which was an amazing opportunity for us. And I'd love to hear and share with people on Tinterweb about what you've learned and your thoughts and your observations about this, both for people out there, but also for young aspiring athletes and people that are interested in sport in general.
I think what was important for me, I probably spent a lot of my career, well, if you give you the backlog to that, I've had 14 operations in my career. None of them wanted, all of them, well, probably not all of them needed, but I realised throughout the middle of my 20s that you put your hands in the trust of professionals, you put your hands in the trust of people that unfortunately don't have, not everybody, there's some really good people in football, there really is, but there's some other people that don't have the knowledge that the football club or the league that they're playing in requires.
And on that, there's actually some really interesting research that's starting to come through about operations and how relatively few of them are actually particularly helpful in the surgical sense. They help, but there's a lot of research starting to come out about the placebo in surgery. With my experiences in the world of football over the last 10 years or so, it's been that sadly there does seem to be, or there did seem to be, and maybe you've got a view on this, there did seem to be an over-reliance on procedures, cortisone injections, surgical procedures, scans. I would have boys that would come in for their initial evaluations literally with piles of scans, 15, 20 high. But it does seem to be changing, and I have to say that the world of sports, particularly football, does seem to be embracing the non-surgical approaches. But obviously in your era, would you say that was pretty prevalent then?
I'd say it depends on which club you were at.
Right.
How much they invested in the medical department, how important it was for the manager to have you out there on a Saturday as opposed to getting you right long term. Those are the battles that football clubs always face. The manager puts pressure on the physio to have you fit. You then take an injection, anti-inflams, whatever it may be, to be out there on a Saturday. You also then got to get your mind in the right place because you're not fully right. You're risking doing further damage, but you go out there for that one game on a Saturday.
And would you say that there was a correlation between clubs that were heavily invested, i.e. richer clubs, bigger clubs, and what would they do? Would they medicalise more or less?
I think the richer clubs, I'd say, or I wouldn't necessarily just say it's the richer clubs, it's the more conscientious clubs.
Yep.
Would work more on prevention, would work more on recovery and those kind of things, and try not to go down the surgical route if possible. But ultimately the game moves that quickly. If that's what it is, your diagnosis is obviously important. Diagnosis, I think, I'm just thinking of my experience at the bigger clubs, your diagnosis would be quick. For argument's sake, when I was at Man United, I broke my leg. I came off the pitch about 9:30 p.m. I was operated on at 2 a.m. in the morning because it was, Ashok Paul, it was the surgeon at the time, brilliant. He made it happen. Had that not happened, my foot swells. I then have to wait for the swelling to go down, have to wait for further diagnosis, and it takes time. that should have been probably a longer time out than it was. I had a metal plate in it, and I was back up and running within a couple of months and back playing. I played with a metal plate in my leg for a year, and the following year I had it taken out again. But if I look at other clubs I'd been at, and I won't name because I don't think it's fair, diagnosis would, well, just ice it for now, go see what happens, see how you are in the morning, and the morning would come and it would be, well, let's wait for the swelling to go down.
But you see, funnily enough, from a clinical perspective, it's a double-edged sword, because if you have access to good people and you have funds to get diagnoses quickly and all the rest of it, you can end up potentially medicalizing a little bit more quickly than you would have done had you only got a piece of cardboard and a string. And so it can be difficult sometimes when you have all the toys and all the access as well. But I think at that level in particular, and squad size probably comes into play as well, where sometimes if there is a high injury rate within the squad, and obviously that's where famously AC Milan was very big on minimizing injuries within the squad, so they could afford a certain level of rotation and letting people rest and recover, and possibly get a better performance to go with it, of course, as well. Now, when you look back, you said that there were certain procedures that you thought perhaps with hindsight weren't necessary or helpful. What was the one, bar for the plating of the leg, that you felt, that's changed everything for me for the better? If I hadn't had that done, then I wouldn't have been able to continue playing or working.
I'd say there's two. Firstly, it was both my shoulders I had operated on.
Yep.
In hindsight, I think I would never have dislocated them both, maybe one, but never dislocated both, had I had the right prehab, and we had a good weights program and a strengthening program for everything. I think that's all it was initially, but I did had them both operated on, both open surgery and repinned. That was the one that probably took a lot of my mental strength to come back from, not because of pain, not because I didn't think it could function, but even after surgery, there'd be certain times where I'd sort of hold off a defender. Yeah. Because I'm relatively small in comparison.
And you're a physical player.
Yeah, and I needed to be physical, because when you're small, you've got to be able to use your body to keep the distance between a man and a ball. And I'd palm somebody off, and at certain times, if it was somebody like yourself who's 6 foot odd, I'd palm them off in their chest, but my shoulder would be exposed. Yeah. And there'd be numerous times in games, and it'd be interesting to watch it back actually, for myself, where I'd palm somebody off and I'd feel my shoulder sublux, or sort of go in and out, and I think, oh my god, and I'd have to pull my shoulder in, and it would take your mind to a place where the ball would roll away and you'd carry on. And I'm sure fans would have looked and thought, why has he just let the ball go? But I'm playing in there. I remember one time in particular, I was at Sheffield United, and Dean Riddle, who was our fitness coach at the time, Riddler, we were playing away at Burnley in the Premier League, if I remember rightly. No, it wasn't. It was in the Championship just before we were trying to get promoted. And we're doing the warm-up, and I just palmed somebody off and my shoulder came out. It was totally out. And Dino said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, just a minute." And I had to keep a straight face and not show how much pain I was in, because dislocating your shoulder was probably the most pain I've been in. And I was like, "Yeah, give me a minute, Dino." And I said, "Just stand there," because I didn't want anybody to see. And I managed to get my shoulder back in. And then I went, right, okay, I'm all right. It's like you exhale. And I went back and got involved in the session. We went in. I took 1 anti-inflam, 2 paracetamol, 2 ibuprofen, and went and played the game. But Dino would always say to me, "I've never seen anybody dislocate the shoulder and then go and play." That was my choice. My choice was, I want to play football. My shoulder's been operated on. What else can they do? I used to strap it every day, and my shoulders would bleed. And under your shirt, people never know. But that's if you want something bad enough, that's what you end up doing. But I left Sheffield United and went to Portsmouth. I had to do a medical, and I thought, right, how am I going to get through this medical? Literally, because if you put my shoulder in a certain place, and I'd strapped it for 4 years solid. So I thought, right, the summer will go, my shoulders will heal, so you won't see the strap marks on the skin. But when I get tested, what's it going to be like? Funnily enough, the back end of that season, I'd started doing pull-ups. This was to go on holiday, so I looked alright on holiday. not for
bit of vanity.
Bit of vanity.
Good. Goes a long way.
So I started doing pull-ups with me, Billy Sharp, and lad Brian Howard, and a few other lads at Sheffield United. So we started doing pull-ups, press-ups, and dips. That was like the thing. Finish training straight in, do that, and with your core work as well. And I found my shoulders got a lot stronger.
Uh-huh.
But I was still nervous going into the medical at Portsmouth because I thought they could put it in a position that I'm really uncomfortable in. It might not feel strong. But that is what I'm saying. And going back to, had I known the strength that pull-ups would have done and would have put into it, and the band work and the dips and everything, I probably wouldn't have needed it in the first place because I might have been able to palm somebody off and had the strength, if you get what I mean.
I mean,
who knows?
There's some really big topics there. The psychology of an injury. I've seen people where that they would run away from the ball if the ball came from a certain angle simply because there was a subconscious memory of getting really badly tackled and then do a tib-fib fracture when the ball was coming from that side, and they don't even realize it. And it's not until we then looked at significant injuries and essentially the trauma, the psychological trauma that came with the physical trauma, and how that then alters the behaviors on the pitch, but obviously can also start affecting things in the changing room and off the pitch as well. It's a huge topic.
I think I agree. The psychological side of it is probably the hardest. You can rehab your body, but you've got to want to do it. You've got to want to go through the pain. You understand that the rehab can be painful. When you just that operation especially, and you've got to build it all the way back from nothing. I saw something actually with Ruben Loftus-Cheek, he went on his he was doing the leg press, and his leg was shaking like this, and I thought, oh my god, that just takes me back to having done my cruciate, the ACL, and you've got nothing in your legs, you're weak, and all those kind of things. So the process, mentally you've got to be up for it. Then getting back out on the grass, you've got to be able to be up for it and get through all these barriers that are telling you stop. Because it's almost like, right, run faster, and that's when I did it last time, and so I can appreciate what you say there. And then I always had this thing, when I get back on the pitch, I just got to throw myself into my first tackle, and it almost was like, right, I've released myself, I'm okay, and I just get on with it. But the shoulders was the one thing that I can honestly say, and nobody would know it, through my whole career up until through my whole career, I had to adapt how I naturally played because my shoulder would come out, but nobody would know. And it's one of those things that you think, well, will I get another contract if I told somebody? So you just shut up about it and get on with it to a certain extent, of how bad it actually is. I mean, sometimes I remember being at home and just putting my arm on the wall and it just came out, and I thought, oh my god. And you're expected to go and play against people who are at the top of their
physical peak
and go and play football alongside that. You're not just physically competing.
I remember thinking to myself when we very first met. I think it was in a London office, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself that actually, of all the people that I could choose to work with, in consideration of obviously the need for assistance and being invited to help you, one of the observations that I remember making was, if I ever was going to gamble on working with somebody, it was going to be with you, for the simple reason of just sheer dogged determination. You were an absolute bulldog, and I have seen people in the world of sport with good careers who gave up well before you did, and who gave up simply, and that's that mental strength that is a crucial ingredient of what makes the football player. I think a lot of the time people are hyper focused on the physical aspects or even the technical aspects, and very often forget about that mental ingredient. So there is a bit of a romantic view that is going on and that is going around about class of '95. I know you got all the kind of the 90s football of England. What's your view on the young player of today versus the young player of dare I say it out loud, 20 years ago. You know, obviously you don't look it, but you know, that's the reality of it. So do you think that there actually is a difference, or that we were just as soft as they are now, or that they've got better support systems, etc., that make that maybe there's a more honest conversation about these things, and that's actually helpful? Or what do you reckon?
I think the environment was such. If I think back to being 16 and I put, you know, versus a 16-year-old now, you leave school and you go into an environment where you're expected to grow up so quickly.
Yep.
To be a man, to be spoken to in a way that if you don't like it, see you later. And you know, so you're not only being tested on your footballing ability, but whether you can withstand somebody in your face, hammering you basically.
This is today, or
no
20 years ago.
20 years ago. Okay. Yeah, you were expected to be able to deal with that. You had responsibilities, you had jobs that you had to do to a certain standard, cleaning boots, cleaning the floor, you know, cleaning the gym, making sure the balls were ready for the next day training, they were pumped to a certain level and washed. You know, the jobs go on. You have to
so these were player chores.
These were player chores at 16. So it was much more work-like then, but you knew what your goal was at the end of it and the reason you were doing the work.
Yep.
And I think at the back end of it, you come out of it with a solid work ethic, you know, and it also builds camaraderie and it builds a real good team bond because you do your jobs together. So we used to have to sit.
Yeah, and of course letting the team down, somebody else has got to cover for you, it creates tensions, so you can learn to cope with those tensions. Yeah,
totally. And you know, we used to have to, at the Cliff, United's old training ground, we have to sit there on the red seats, famous red seats as you walk in, and all the YTSs at the time in our scholars would sit there and you couldn't go home until you'd done your jobs, but the coaches at the time would come and check your jobs. And I always remember Sir Alex, he went down in the gym, so the gym was at the back, and he said, right, a few of you come up, so you had to go up and then go down to the gym at the back. And we followed him into the gym and he said, right, it took about 6 of us to lift this big machine. And he went underneath it like that, found a bit of dust, and he went mad. He went, you call yourself, you know, standard, you don't want to go home, and you there's dust under this. And in reality, there's no way not 2 of you could have picked it up and cleaned underneath it, and that's the reality of it. But it set the standard for what was expected, because you knew next time if there was any dust under the machine, you know, there's going to be a problem. And it's this in it. There was a real hard setting of standards that I think doesn't correlate anymore. Not because certain people don't want to do it at football clubs, but I think the environments are not allowed, you know, with the rules in place and the anti-bullying and that kind of thing, because it was sometimes it's a very, very fine line, true. So the difference between the environment then and the environment now and what people have to go through is very different. So players now, you know, they have a lot from early. So if I put myself in, if I was 10 at United now, 11, I'd have people picking me up, you know. Or any major club, not just United, you'd have people picking you up. You'd be in digs, or you'd have someone pick you up and take you to training. They'd then pick you up and take you home. You would then have, you know, you'd have your food provided. You'd have all these different things that basically make you not have to think. And I think every club, it disables the human being in those teen years where you need to learn your life skills. You know, you need to learn how to be streetwise. You need to learn how to, and also see if you really want it. How many of those lads who are being picked up and taken to training every day would do it if they had to get 2 buses and walk through somewhere where they were in danger? And they thought, how many of them would do it? You know, so all these different challenges that you face. You know, I remember at the Cliff, I had to get on the bus into town, get on the bus out of town into Salford, and then as you get off the bus, you had to walk from where the bus stop was all the way down to the Cliff, which was probably about a quarter of a mile, maybe, but about a quarter of a mile, give or take. But on the corner, there's always a group of lads who would stand, older lads, and I'd be in my school uniform. Obviously, I didn't go to a school around there. Be in my school uniform, or I'd have my kit in my bag, depending on what time it was. And I always remember that feeling in my stomach. You're not in your own area. You're not in your own area. They're not your, you know. And as a kid, you fight. You know, you're only going to fight or whatever it is. So you always have that wrenching feeling in your stomach, but you've got to game face it. You know, and walk through the lads. They'd be saying stuff, and you think, I don't stand a chance here. If I react, I'm in trouble. But you'd have to do it to get to training.
And this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's the flip side to bullying, like you quite rightly say,
Yeah.
whether that be, you know, institutional within a club or within a work environment,
Yeah.
or whether it be out on the street. It does have, where as much as it has the capability of becoming traumatic, it also has the capability of forming personalities.
100%.
So I guess in a way, you know, in order to protect the person and people from experiencing some pretty damaging experiences, that there's potentially a bit of a loss of, you mentioned, work ethic and perhaps a bit of personality.
Definitely.
But then I guess that the world of football has gotten more and more into buying skills and bodies that execute to perfection
Yeah.
a particular role on the pitch, and less of a personality. So then going back to the class of 92, sorry, do you think that was perhaps the pinnacle of a collection of personalities on one pitch, on one side, and that has actually not ever been seen again?
I think so. Yeah. If you go to that era, you talk about the class of '92. You know, every single one of them, all from different backgrounds. Beckham from London, Scalzi from Oldham, you know, Nicky Butt from Gorton. Then you've got Phil and Gary who were over from Bury, all from different parts, but as a collective had this relentless work ethic and
they're all they're all formed by the same machine.
Yeah, but other people formed in the same machine didn't necessarily do it as a collective like that. They all drove each other on. And we talk about personality. There's a lot of personality in there, you know.
Still to this day, I mean.
Yeah, totally. They all stand on their, you know, they're all individuals. They're not following, no one's following anybody else, but they all stand on their own square. But when it's about going into battle, and I was obviously a good few years younger than them, so when I was in the in the academy, it was this centre of excellence at the time they called it. We'd go and watch the youth team, and what stood out for me then, you know, they played Leeds, and it was like watching a men's game because they got stuck their feet, you know, stuck their foot in. I mean, you know, tackled hard, competed for every single inch, and that sometimes is what's lost now. That the character doesn't come out on the pitch.
Yeah.
We talk about, you know, and many people say about the leaders on the pitch, and then some people go, well, you know, we need a leader, but then you say, well, where are they? Not that there's not talented players, not that there's not people who've got all the attributes to play at the top level. They clearly are, and some fantastic players, better than I was, but character, you know.
And it's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because, you know, there's obviously there's massive effort being expressed by the world of football in regards to, you know, playing fair, anti-racism movement, anti-bullying movement. I mean, football has been enormously powerful in changing attitudes towards homophobia, towards issues around mental health, because it has such a strong impact on people at large. But it's almost like that the flip side to being more sensitive, to being more humane, is that it might actually come at a price of perhaps changing work ethics and an aspect of character. But perhaps there are ways of doing both. Perhaps there are ways of being open-minded, of being positive, reinforcing, supportive and kind on the one hand, but at the same time still being able to build character. I was thinking about in Japanese schools, you know, there are no janitors there, apparently, because the cleaning is actually done by the children, and they will clean class at the end or at various points in the day, and maintain, and these are all things that mean that there is a work ethic, there is a character, there is a team spirit and bond. And perhaps some of these strategies need to be revisited in modern day football to regain some of that personality, that kind of character and strength.
Accountability, you know, and I agree with you totally. I mean, I've spent a bit of time in Colombia.
Yes.
And
Yes, please. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It threw me back. So I went to Cali. I spent a bit of time in Medellin, a bit of time in Cali. Some of the really, really tough kids. You know, you can see it in their eyes. There's no messing. But they've got football's like just softens them a little bit, but on the pitch, they're warriors.
And these are kids that are doing 3-4 bus trips to get
three, four. Well, they'd get 3 or 4 on a moped just to get to training. You know, so they'd all chip in and get a moped, then they'll all get to training, that kind of thing. Some of them walk for 1.5 miles after working, going to school, then they come to football and they get there on time. And there's a responsibility to get there on time, and they do it because they see it as their only way out of their environment, and it's something that they love doing. Then they'll go home and still have to do chores within the house. So you're talking about, fulfilling a day where you may get up at 5 or 6, and then you go to bed at 11 o'clock, and you repeat and you repeat and you repeat. And the humility of them and their work ethic, their desire, their lack of moaning, is, for me, it humbled me. Some of these lads don't eat, and when I say they don't eat, they don't get any food, so you'd have to give them, the guy who went over there with would just give them 50p, go and get yourself a meal of rice with an egg on top, and they were like, oh my god, that's amazing. But they wouldn't moan about it. You'd have to ask them. You'd have to say, one of the lads there, I remember he said,
and of course, I mean that's almost the dark end of the spectrum, isn't it?
100%.
And for the sport to go there, and essentially tap into people to give those opportunities is phenomenal.
It is, but if you think, why are most clubs now looking? They spread the network so far, but they're looking at African players, look at South American players, players that come from a background of hardship because they know they'll run through a brick wall to achieve. They face a different challenge. And
ultimately, and on that note, I think we've both come to the conclusion that ultimately success is a bit of skill, but it's fundamentally hard graft, isn't it? And that's
focus, hard work. Yeah.
And people forget that.
Working.
So I have the skills. Well, yeah, that's great that you have the skills. Now go and do it. 12 hours a day.
Yeah. People think it's idealistic when you talk about Cristiano Ronaldo. Yeah. Like he just went in the gym and did a few weights and developed his body like that, and that was it.
That boy's done nothing but work his entire life.
He came to United skinny. Mm-hmm. He came to United a bag of tricks, got everybody off the edge of their seat, but there was no end product to it, and he was frustrating to a lot of people. Certain fans were starting to get really annoyed. He maintained his focus. He set his targets. He'd go and go behind the trees because his shooting wasn't great, and take a bag of balls behind the trees and shoot, and he'd go all over the place, and then worked at his craft until he found what was good for him. He set his targets with Sir Alex, setting his target of say 10 goals. Once you hit that, okay, you've done your 10 goals, right? That's enough. That's fine. What about 20? And it's constant changing of your target to maintain progression.
And that is a crucial ingredient, isn't it, to success? Is that inability to be satisfied?
Totally.
Totally. That just I've done 10 now. I need to do 20, and the inability to revel in what you've achieved, and just understanding that you need to move on. And on that note, is there anything else that you'd love to share with our audience?
Of course there is. I think if we take it back to the physical body, I genuinely say this, and no plug or anything, I genuinely say this. Had I found you at 20 instead of 20 and 29, 30, I genuinely think I wouldn't have had the operations I had. I think I would have not felt the pain and discomfort that I felt on a lot of things throughout my career. Hence the reason I think it's important that young players come and see you.
Yeah.
Really important. I know quite a lot of players that have come to see you and not knowing what it was at first. Sure. Not knowing what is it? Is he a chiropractor? And it's sometimes hard for me to explain.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to explain because of the whole holistic approach to it. But for me, had I found it early on, genuinely think I would have had a better career. Or, you know, been on the pitch.
You know,
it would have been easier.
and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the plug. And you see, the thing is, we to this day we still find it difficult to explain, because fundamentally, once you go through it, it's so obvious. But when you look at it from the outside in, it's odd, it's unusual. To combine various therapists, various disciplines together to achieve a common goal, because it just doesn't happen out there. Football clubs are actually one of the very few places where you have something approximating multidisciplinary teams, but even they are relatively limited and have relatively few tools in them. But I do hope that over time, and actually, as I was saying to you earlier today, all the research is pointing in the direction that when it comes to preserving well-being, health, and performance, as well as addressing chronic complex disorders, which is ironic because they're so far removed from each other on the surface of things. Yeah. But actually, when it comes to managing that, it is about this multidisciplinary approach, and not about indeed a chiropractor, a physio, a GP or whatever, but actually people working together and addressing that physical, that mental, that nutritional aspect. But hopefully, and I'm seeing some encouraging signs in particularly in football, because obviously there's more money there and more value being put, particularly in the English league. I am seeing some pretty promising developments.
You know what was interesting for me? The first day I walked into the office in your clinic, should I say, in London.
London, yeah.
And I walked in, and I'll never forget, your explanation of basically, trying to keep yourself on the pitch. You're a commodity. As a player, you're a commodity. I spent a lot of time in treatment rooms. That in itself gives you a brand of he's always injured, or he gets injured a lot. To have somewhere like coming to see you that gave me the opportunity to stay on the pitch more than off the pitch, changes perception also. But I also remember the key fundamentals which I think clubs should know: your teeth, your back, your feet. They're three things that just, for me, it's
tremendously important.
Tremendously important. But you said to me, we sat there and we spoke for 20 minutes, half an hour. And I always remember you said to me, you've got a tooth missing at the back on whatever side it was. I remember sat there thinking, how do you know? Do you know what I mean? How do you know? And I remember saying, well, how do you know that? And you explained and you showed me on my back the different points of torsion. And then you said, let me see your orthotics. And the fact that you'd been through, I think it's just over 50 people within this country who would provide orthotics, and not any of them met the standards. We talk about standards we've been talking about just before. Not any of them met the standards that you would think are high enough for an elite sportsman. And then obviously, you said, you should never have done your cruciate. Something as small as the leg length discrepancy that I have. And it was little things like that, and you think, I've spent years trying to maintain my body based on what different club physicians say, and physios and fitness coaches, but nobody's ever explained it, stripped it all back and gone, that's why. Not only that, coming down to see you and then travelling down to see you and then getting back playing again, I probably played more games at the back end of my career.
I remember
when you're meant to be getting older.
Yeah, I remember keeping track of that.
Yeah. You're meant to be getting older and winding down. I played more games consistently than I did probably throughout my 20s, and it confirmed it. And not only that, the people I've referred would say the same thing. The common thing people would say, and I don't want to make your head big, but people go, I don't get it. He's a magician. Like it doesn't make sense. And I say, as long as it keeps you on the pitch, it doesn't need to make sense.
And see, the thing is, realistically and in reality, that whole thing, the magic, the ginger ninja, the back whisperer, that kind of stuff, it's actually almost sad, because what it comes down to is appreciating that the magic is not the physician, the clinician, the team that is behind, but actually the magic of that body of yours. And in reality, all we're really doing is looking at behaviors, global behaviors of how a person moves through space. and the quality and the quantity of the control that they have over that. And of course, there are lots of things that interfere in your ability to express optimal behaviors.
Yeah.
And some of those are physical things like the tooth, or a scar, or an old injury in a cruciate or otherwise, a leg length discrepancy, but also psychological things.
Yeah.
Even to the point of what you've eaten that morning or the night before. It will all impact on what mental space you're in, and that will then define what your field of vision is and how you're going to input into the game. And being invited to optimize that, for you towards the end of your career, and then other people since, the magic is actually in that, and it's almost painfully simple when you start to think of it in those terms. But yeah, I very much appreciate that, and thanks again.
I think you know me enough by now. I wouldn't say it if I didn't think it. So,
Danny, again, thank you very much for coming in today. Very much appreciate the input, and in fact, I feel like there's lots of other things that we could discuss, and hopefully we'll have a follow up on this.
Part 2 in the testimonial. 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, love it.
Thanks a lot.
Ledge.
See you in a bit.
Top man, thank you.